Welcome back, Pirate Crew. It's your captain, Yeehaw Yadam, and for today's video, we're going to be doing some live locals gameplay commentary. Before we start this video, I want to go ahead and give a big shout out to Archerous TCG. He is a One Piece TCG content creator who I stumbled across his Vivi video, and it inspired me to take Vivi to local. There are two really big things that really inspired me to take the deck to locals. Firstly, I just so happened to have a very blinged version of Vivi. The cards in his list I may or may not have happened to have in high rarity. And secondly, he showed me a card that was something that I didn't really give too much thought to, but Chaka. Chaka is a very, very strong card. When I played Ace, one of the cards that I coped so hard on was Pell. Now, congratulations to Ace getting second place in a big tournament. Pell is a fantastic card. The amount of board control that it gives you for such a mid-range body is pretty darn good. Now, Chaka is very similar to Pell in the fact that it can go ahead and do some early KOs. It has board control. It is, 1K weaker, but it is also 2 Dawn cheaper. So because of that, I think they're very similar in comparison. Obviously, Chaka only allows itself to fit into the Vivi deck, and because of that, that's enough reason for me to take it to locals. Now, I'm going to be showcasing here a Glare, me playing against a Glare deck, but it is green, purple Doflamingo. Now, this is a matchup that I would argue is one of the matchups that is favorable for Vivi. Vivi seems very similar to an Ace deck. It's a deck that wants to remove cards from my opponent's board while keeping cards on my board, right? They want to use very sticky creatures like Marco, characters that have 5k or higher stats that KO, like not Nico Robin, like Pell or Chaka, and use those cards to gain board control. And they want to gain hand advantage while using their very powerful event spells, Radical Beam, Happiness Punch, to keep life. So they're very similar decks. What Vivi offers that Ace doesn't, obviously, is the fact that your leader can constantly draw, and it also gives you access to some of the best removal in the game in the form of Gum Gum Red Rock and Gum Gum 3000 Worlds. Now, my opponent has a very fantastic start here, Buena Fiesta into Nami, a very classic going first curve, and I have a very great Vivi curve. Tap Draw and Nami Chaka, which Nami is going to go ahead and be here for a very specific reason. Now, as you can see, the Vivi version that I went ahead and showcased on the channel when I did the 30-minute testing was more Whitebeard Pirate focused, and there's nothing wrong with that. I still think that the Whitebeard Pirate cards are very, very strong, but I also found that, if I use Nami to search these very powerful event removals, that's equivalently as strong. Chaka being probably one of the outliers of the deck. There's not really a way to find him besides if I played Ingram, which I'm not, but I may be greedy enough in the future to play him into my deck. So I whiff on the Nami, play the Chaka. My opponent goes ahead and swings with the Nami. I believe I counter or I opt to take this life. I think I give him the King because King isn't going to come down at this point in time. What King offers for the deck is refuel. Very similar to what Queen gives into purple, King does for this deck. So we want to go ahead and remove, and once they do like a weak turn, we go King double draw. And that's going to really cement the game from there. So my opponent swings with the Nami, plays Brook, plays a secondary Nami. Now he's seeing exactly what he needs. Nami is a card that keeps the green-purple Doflamingo in this matchup, right? Because I'm not going to hit their life. I'm going to starve them as much as I physically can. I go ahead and put one down on Chaka. Chaka's going to go ahead and minus the Nami, making it a 6 versus 3, and pop the Buena Fiesta. He lets it go. Very solid for me. Now my opponent did forget to keep up 2 Dawn here, which he could have like Punk Gibson. But that would have just allowed me to Marco down. I was kind of just baiting a Marco play here, but it just doesn't end up happening. So I just instead opt to go Vivi ability, summon Chaka, which is also fantastic use of 5 Dawn, and pass it back to my opponent. Now that I have 2 Chakas, it's going to be better than 1. And one thing that I really like about Chaka is that when you got 2 of them, they can clear almost anything on the board by themselves, right? Chaka, Chaka, choo, choo, if you know what I mean. So my opponent goes 5 at the Chaka, and 5 is just not good enough. It's also going to find him a 2k, which again, these Namis have already got him some pretty solid value. I'm going to go ahead and defend it by giving him a 2k. He swings 5 again. My hand is just 2ks, event counters, and a Marco. And I want to keep this Marco because Marco, I want to use it in conjunction with these Chakas to get a really good board clear. Now my opponent goes and does a Queen. Again, another fantastic follow-up. Draw 2, discard a card. Get deeper into the deck, so he's keeping hand size even though I haven't attacked him, which is unfortunate. My opponent's going to go ahead and untap 2 here. Back to my turn. Now I have a lot of Dawn to work with. I'm at 8 Dawn here. I have 2 Chakas on the board. I have a lot of things going for me. I'm going to go Chaka, gain a Dawn. And Dawn times 1 when attacking. Going to swing at this Nami and minus the Queen by 3. Now, this is an interesting play, right? Because this, you know, kind of like shows what I'm going to be doing in the future, right? I'm trying to have him go event counter here. And if he event counters, I go Marco, KO the Queen, place a Dawn on Marco, give it rush, KO the Nami. That's the scenario that I want to be in. Or take 3 cards away from his hand. One of the two. My opponent opts to defend there with the Queen, which is interesting. I go Chaka effect, swing at the Nami. I'm trying to bait a spider web. He goes spider web here, goes all the way up to 7 on my 6, restand the Nami. I go Marco, clear the Nami. But because he allowed his whole board to be cleared, it makes me wonder what I do with the rest of my turn. I don't even know. I'm going to go ahead and opt to play a Doflamingo blocker here. Doflamingo blocker is going to go ahead and stack the top of my deck. I can go ahead and draw a card and pass. It's not terrible. I get to develop a blocker here, get to, you know, cater my draw, which is also not terrible. And I also just get to defend double Chaka, which is always a winning position for me. It's a little bit easier to defend Pell, and that's why I'm a really big Pell enjoyer. Because if you're able to stick like a Pell into this board, my opponent's also going to have a really tough time clearing him, and that's going to create a very good scenario for me. Now, I do play Mihawks in this deck because Artress was playing them, but I just don't see a reason for Mihawk. Unfortunately, it just doesn't do what the deck wants to do. In the matchups that he is good, you could just play Ace, and Ace is probably better because for the same amount of Dawn, you get to play Ace as if you were a Whitebeard character, right? You get to -3/-3, gain a rusher, draw a card, and probably clear the board with that, right? If you have a Chaka and or a Pell after that, you get to immediately wipe the board. So I might just opt to, one of my criticisms for the deck after playing it is that Mihawk unfortunately didn't feel exactly correct in the deck, and probably I would switch it out for a potential Ace. Ace would be probably a little bit nicer. So my opponent goes 7 at my Chaka, and I have Happiness Punch. I have a Dawn up. Now I also have Radical Beam that I go ahead and catered off of my draw. Can't use it here because I'm at 3 Dawn, so I opt to go use the Happiness Punch. Happiness Punch is a great card. I do like it a little bit more than the guard point, even though it doesn't have a trigger. It's a little bit more versatile, and there are some scenarios where you can go ahead and -2, -1, but if you use it as a guard point, that's also just not bad. My opponent goes ahead and plays an Uda here after playing Buena Fiesta and declaring a bunch of attacks. I block, I do a bunch of stuff. Goes back to my turn here. And the Uda is pretty crucial because the Uda is going to go ahead and stop me from doing a double Chaka turn. But I do have a Mihawk here. Now my Flamingo blocker showed me that I have another Mihawk in the top of my deck, because usually I want to save my Mihawks for a potential Flamingo. For a potential Luffy, right? And when he goes ahead and goes Luffy Nami, I want to answer that with a Mihawk, right? That's the best case scenario that I'm going to get out of it. I go Chaka, swing at the Brook, pop the Buena Fiesta, swing at my opponent for 5. He defends it, and I pass my turn to my opponent. Now, this is a great turn for him to go 10-drop, pass, but that's not necessarily going to put him in a better game state. I'm going to go take this life here. I'm down in card size. I have 4 cards in hand. I'm going to go up to 5 here, draw for turn, go up to 6, use Vivi's ability, go up to 7. And now we're going to start to see exactly what the Vivi deck can do. He's going to go ahead and make sure that those Chakas stay sleepy. I almost, muscle memory, make those Chakas active. Now, I was holding this Red Rock for this exact scenario, so I go ahead and I immediately Red Rock the Flamingo away. And now I have a bit of Dawn to work here on my turn. Now, I could go and develop a Nami. I could draw a card. I'm going to opt to draw a card here because that seems fine with me. I could go ahead and play the Nami, or I can play this Chopper, and Chopper just seems fantastic because it's going to make sure that these Chakas are much more easy to defend. Now, my opponent is, and the reason I'm not attacking with this Mihawk is just to make any further Flamingos worse, right? If my opponent goes, if I swing with this Mihawk, my opponent just takes a life, which he already wants to do. And if he's able to develop the Flamingo, then we're in a bad spot because now he's going to freeze Chaka Mihawk. It's going to be much more harder for me to deal with the scenario, as I know I'm not getting a Red Rock in the top 5 cards in my deck because of the Flamingo blocker. My opponent goes Nami. Nami's going to find him a Luffy. And this is the 3rd Nami that my opponent's seen, and a Queen, and a Flamingo. So my opponent is seeing everything on all edges. He goes 7 at my Chaka, and then I'm going to use Chaka I'm going to use my Chopper as a guard point, and that feels freaking good. Back to my turn here, trying to see exactly how I deal with this potential board state. My opponent does have 2 Dawn up here. I'm going to place a Dawn under Chaka. Swing at my opponent's leader. Activate Chaka's ability to minus the Nami by 3. My opponent Uda's on -1 to, do that. I get to do the Marco here. I get to draw a card because of my leader ability. I give Marco Rush. And then I do get to just attack my opponent. I ask my opponent how many cards in hand, and my hand has gone from 4 to much, much higher. I can go ahead and hit my opponent for 9. And if I'm hitting him for 9, I might as well also hit him for 7 here. Now, he probably should let this 7 go through. Just because you want as many resources as possible. My opponent does agree with me and thinks that takes the 7. And it goes back to my opponent's turn. Now, again, many decks are very telegraphed into what their strongest play is. My opponent just taps 10, summons the Flamingo. Flamingo is going to opt to reduce or, to stop 3 characters from attacking. It's going to be the Marco, the Mihawk, and the Chaka. And I can understand the Marco over the Chaka. My Chaka really isn't going to do anything to his 1 character in board, which is Flamingo. So unfortunately, it's not going to grant me too much value. My opponent's going to go ahead and attack my Chaka for 5, and I will give him this Brook. Brook is not really going to do much after I have double Chaka on the board, and I'm just trying to transition my board. As you can see, I'm just upgrading it with each passing turn. That's kind of exactly what I want to do. My board right now is at a 5K. I want my board to be at a 6K because, the Marco being the weakest card on the board. Then my board to be a 9K if possible, right? It is a dream, but it's something that we want to accomplish. Now, this is a turn where I get to King. This is my refuel turn because even though he did Flamingo me here, sure, I get to go King, double draw, attack for 5, attack for 8. And that's going to go ahead and proc some sort of, counter. I should have probably attacked with the Chaka first to play around the Punk Gibson, but that was obviously a mistake on my end. And then swung with the King just to get more cards out of my opponent's hand. But that's absolutely fine. As you can see here, I am upgrading my Nami into a King, which is excellent. And yeah, my board's looking pretty formidable. He attaches a singular Dawn to this Flamingo. Sorry, excuse me. And this Flamingo is going to go ahead and swing at this King. Now, he must have forgot. I mean, he shouldn't know that I have Radical Beam in my hand, but he must have forgot about it. I'm going to go ahead and Radical Beam out of this attack. It's exacties 12. I think he was playing around Happiness Punch, which is understandable after he's seen a couple of them. Then my opponent's trying to decide exactly how much Dawn he wants to place and trying to remove these Chakas. Doesn't attach us to Dawn, and I could go ahead and just play Bad Manners Kick, pitch a card to, protect the Chaka, but I kind of need the board space because I think, he has 7 Dawn left. With 7 Dawn, he's just going to go ahead and summon a Luffy. And because he's going to summon a Luffy, I need the board space to summon Mihawk. So I have to let the Chaka go, unfortunately. But, this is all according to plan. So with one play in mind, I'm trying to think of exactly how I can sequence it to get the most bang for my buck. And if I go Chaka, he just gets to block it with Luffy. So I'm just going to go ahead and bottom deck the Luffy. Right, because my opponent would block immediately if I swung with Chaka, just because of the fact that he knows the Luffy is under scrutiny from the Mihawk. So I go ahead and swing with Chaka at leader, use the effect to minus his Flamingo, and he's going to go ahead. He still has 2 Dawn up. That was his mistake for leaving it on in an unrested position. I swing with the Chaka first because Punk Gibson can't touch me from this point in time. Got to go ahead and Spiderweb the Flamingo. Sorry, again, a little under the weather. And then that kind of removes a lot of defense from my opponent's hand, right? So he defends. I go 6 with the Marco. I go 8. He has to take the 8 because unless he gives me double 2K, which he can, he does have double 2K in his hand. But he really doesn't want his hand to diminish. I go 9. He blocks with the Uda. And yeah, not a bad turn for me whatsoever. And it goes back to my opponent's turn and back on their turn. They're trying to see exactly what they do. Their hand is starting to see, he has no more event counters. My cards are 9K on the board. Make it a little difficult for the Flamingo player. He's going to go ahead and Buena Fiesta, try to find his way out of this match. And my opponent opts to show me his hand because it just seems like he's a little bit defeated at this point. As you can see here after this handshake, he concedes after this point in time. But you can see here I have 7 cards in my hand. They're all counterable in live because of the Bad Manners Kick. My board is huge. I'm at 2 life still, and I'm very comfortable being at 2 life. And yeah, this is a deck that is considered like a tier 1, tier 1.5 deck. I would consider it a tier 1.5 deck. I know a lot of people consider it a little bit higher, and that's respectable. I'm not here to argue with those individuals, but this is a very respected deck in Doflamingo, and we have Vivi, just a deck that's usually not respected, and when I was playing this tournament was often laughed at, but I did very well here. In this tournament, it's also important to note that I played versus this green-purple Doflamingo. I played versus 3 Whitebeards, and I played versus Doflamingo Mono Blue. If you can guess my record, I went X1. The only matchup that I lost was to this Doflamingo because of the fact that Flamingo is such a hard deck for my deck to play with. It's the same reason that I believe other decks struggle with blue, because blue just, if they have specific removal, it goes very, very poorly. If I summon Chaka and they 3000 worlds and I don't have another threat, I'm in a bad spot. If I go Marco and they remove it as well, well, my sticky board that was mid-range is now gone, and unless I have something to pair it with, I'm going to be in a bad spot. If they can also couple that with very powerful removal, their own Mihawks, which is crazy versus my deck, and Kaido. Kaido destroyed me. My opponent went Kaido, and I red rocked the first one, but the second one was almost immortal. I had to wait many turns before I could deal with it. And by the time that I did, my opponent was, I was at 0 life. My opponent was at 4 life, but they had no cards in hand, and I had a grip, but unless I had blockers, my large hand size wasn't going to transition into countering out of 15k, which was my main issue. And eventually, I did end up losing that game because my leader couldn't attack. He was at 3 life, and I had 3 characters on the board, and I just couldn't push through his life plus a blocker. As you can see, that was a very tough matchup, but the 3 new gates were very easy matchups. Chaka, just how Ace in the East had a very good matchup versus Newgate, so does Vivi, I would venture to say. You play so many 2Ks that most of their 6K attacks you can get out of. You have a lot of defense, you have a lot of blockers, and when they go ahead and turn their board sideways, which they almost shouldn't, Chaka just cleans the board right up. My Marco removes their blockers. They just can't do anything. Their Frankies just get removed to my 3K, to my Chaka. Just something that was so difficult before, right? Because, in the past, we would have to go like Nico Robin plus Gordon to remove their Frankies. But now, Chaka just does it by itself. I don't need a combination of cards. I just need Chaka. If I have 2 Chakas, they can't stick anything on their board because their whole board is 6Ks. And 2 Chakas just removes it entirely. If I couple that with a Marco, give it rush, and then all of a sudden, all my attacks are going towards leader. 6, 6, 6. Like multiple Chakas are going at your face for 6. Proccing interaction while simultaneously clearing their board, and that's the scenario where Whitebeard loses. And that's exactly why when I was playing these matchups, it felt so well. And that's exactly where Vivi wants to be. If you ever choose to play this deck, take it to locals, take it to a regional, whatever you want to do with it, the deck has very solid matchups and also very bad ones. The bad ones are going to be the control matchups. Your deck is a slow control deck with not much grind, and the fact that your leader can't attack is really bad. You have a lot of things going for you, but once you play into blue or to yellow, you're going to have a bad time. But if you can queue into other decks, mainly the red decks, the favored decks, you're going to be in a good spot. Your Law matchups, your Newgate, your Zoro are actually not terrible matchups. You want a hard mulligan for your Chakas, for your Marcos, and those cards will stabilize you, and with your vast amount of defense, you can eventually turn the game into your favor with refueling with a king, and you win off the back of 1 king. So it's really nice. I do recommend you guys to try this deck. I want to again thank Artress for inspiring me to take it to a locals and manning up and playing Vivi. So that was really cool. And as always, guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. If you have any comments you want to go ahead and say about the deck, I feel like I left everything on the table. You can go ahead and hit me in the comment section with anything you want to discuss about Vivi, One Piece, or life in general. And as always, if you guys are enjoying this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.